Hello dear viewers, a very warm welcome to our channel. In this video we are going to have a look at some of the top symptoms of bad alternator. The alternator is a critical component in a vehicle electrical system. It is responsible for generating electrical power that is needed to recharge the battery and run electrical loads when the engine is running. The alternator is usually driven by a belt connected to the engine crankshaft. So as the engine runs, it causes the alternator to spin and generate alternating current, which will then be converted to DC current and then supplied to vehicle's electrical system. So the main function of the alternator can simply be regarded as three. One is charging the battery. The alternator is responsible for providing the necessary voltage and current to keep the vehicle's battery charged while the engine is running. The other benefit of having an alternator is it is going to power electrical components. Once the engine is started, all electrical loads such as headlights, radio, and other climate control and other electrical systems in the vehicle are to be powered by the alternator. And the other task of the alternator is regulating voltage. Some of the alternators have inbuilt regulator. This inbuilt regulator maintains a consistent voltage output that can be ranging from 13 to 14 volts in a 12 volt system, or it can reach to 28 volt in a 24 volt system. These alternators, they come in different size and different capacities depending on the electrical demand of the vehicle. So large engines, large vehicles require more electrical accessories, and then they will have higher output alternators. So the voltage will be the same, but the output current will be different. Now the problem is over time these alternators can fail due to wear and tear on internal components. So in this video we are going to have a look at some of the top symptoms that indicate you have a failing alternator. Well, the first symptom that indicates you have a problem with the alternator is battery not charging. If the alternator is not properly charging the battery will slowly lose its charge over time, leading to a dead battery. So frequent battery failure, frequent battery losing charge can be an indication of a non-functioning alternator. The other symptom of a bad alternator is battery warning light remaining on. So the battery or charging system warning light is there on the dashboard. It will be illuminated when you turn the ignition key on, and once the engine is started, it should go off. But if this light remains on, it indicates that there is a problem in the charging system. So it could be a faulty alternator that is not providing proper voltage. So the second indicator is battery warning light remaining on. The other symptom of a bad alternator is when there are electrical issues. For example, if you happen to have dimming headlights, if we have flickering dashboard lights or other electrical component problems, that can also indicate an alternator problem. So the alternator should be capable of providing and handling all the electrical loads once the engine is started. If that is not the case, if you happen to observe that headlights, for example, if the lights are becoming dim, that could be an indication of a failing alternator. Frequent battery drain, as mentioned earlier, frequent battery drain. If the battery is draining faster than normal, it may be an indication of poor charging system. If you happen to have a trouble starting the vehicle as a result of a dead or weak battery from bad alternator, so that could be an indication of a failing alternator. So if you happen to have trouble starting your vehicle, well, it could be a problem related to the battery, or it could be a problem related to the starting system, but it can also be caused by a failing charging system. Abnormal noise generated from the alternator can also be an indication of an alternator going bad. Whining noise or squealing noise coming from the alternator side, it could be caused by bad alternator bearing. If you happen to have high-pitched whining noise or squealing noise, especially when you are accelerating, that could be an indication of a failing alternator component. Usually those bearings, they dry out and they start making noise, making very high-pitched noise, especially when you accelerate and you happen to hear that kind of noise. It could be an indication of a failing alternator. If the battery is frequently overcharging, that could be an indication of a failing alternator regulator. Well, this particular trouble is associated with alternator regulator not functioning properly. So an overactive alternator can overcharge the battery, but this has to be regulated by the regulator. So if there is an inbuilt regulator inside the alternator, and if that regulator is not functioning properly, it can lead to overcharging, it can lead to battery getting hot, it can lead to battery requiring filling up with top-upping water, if that is the case. If you happen to measure the battery voltage and happen to know that it is below the alternator required voltage, if a voltmeter test of the battery show low voltage, and that could be an indication of a charging system not functioning properly. Bad alternator belt that is slipping or damaged, it can prevent the alternator from functioning properly. It can also become noisy. These alternator belts, they happen to generate some unusual noise if they start to go bad. If the vehicle requires frequent battery replacement, that is also an indication of bad alternator. If the vehicle requires frequent battery replacement, that can also be an indication of bad alternator. So these are some of the top symptoms indicating a bad alternator in your vehicles. Symptoms like dead battery, rapidly draining battery, dimming lights, electrical system malfunction, all this indicates there is a problem with the alternator. In order to pinpoint the exact cause of the problem, you have to be familiar with how the alternators work. The alternator contains an electromagnetic rotor that spins within a stationary stator. When the engine is running, the rotor will become magnetized because electricity is supplied to the rotor from the battery as the ignition switch is turned on, and the rotating magnetic rotor generates an alternating current in the stator winding, and this alternating current is then converted to DC current by rectified bridge diodes that are installed inside the alternator. The rotor is driven by belt connected to the engine crankshaft. So as the engine runs, it causes the rotor to spin at a speed proportional to the engine speed, and this generates electricity, and that electricity, it has to be rectified, and then before it leaves the alternator, if there is an inbuilt regulator, it will also be regulated. So there is a constant voltage that is coming out of the alternator. So we have key components that can go bad. The rotor, which contains an electromagnet that spins to induce AC voltage in the stator, is one of the main components. If the rotor happen to have a failing coil, it can cause the alternator not to generate voltage. And then the voltage that is generated will be generated inside the stator winding. This is a stationary winding where the AC voltage is generated. So if there is a problem, if there is an open circuit with the stator, if there is some insulation failure leading to short circuit inside the stator, that can also be another cause of failing alternator. And the other and most common failure is on the rectifier. These rectifiers, there are a set of diodes that are there to convert the AC generated to DC. So these rectifier diodes, they are very susceptible to failure if they are exposed to extreme temperatures, if they are exposed to extreme operating conditions. So that could also be a problematic area for the alternators. And there is also a voltage regulator. Some of the alternators, they have an inbuilt voltage regulators that maintains a consistent voltage ranging somewhere in 13-14 volt. So if there is a problem with the voltage regulator, the alternator charging system will start to malfunction. For example, if the regulator is not regulating the voltage, you might be getting extremely high output. So if the output of the charging system is higher than 14.8 volt, it is definitely going to be a regulator problem. So these are some of the main components. There are other additional components like cooling fan, for example. This keeps the alternator components cool during operation. And also there is an alternator belt that can go bad. It connects the alternator to the crankshaft. So there are some of the main alternator problems are related to worn out brush. The brushes are there to conduct electricity to the rotor. So the brush, if they wear out over time. That will cause the alternator not to function properly. And bearing failure, the rotor bearings can wear down, causing noise and reduced output. They can be very noisy if the bearings start to fail. Diode failure, as we have mentioned, if the rectifier diodes can become faulty, they prevent proper DC conversion. And regulator failure, malfunctioning regulator can lead to overcharging or it can lead to undercharging. And belt issues, a slipping, cracked or broken alternator belt, it can also prevent proper operation of the alternator. It can be noisy sometimes. So these are some of the main areas where alternator failures usually happen. So proper alternator maintenance, including regular belt inspection and replacement, can help extend its lifespan. Eventually all alternators will need to be replaced as part of normal vehicle maintenance. So these are some of the top symptoms and some of the top causes and failure areas inside your vehicle alternator. Well, that is all we have for you in this video. If you like what has been presented, please smash the like button. If you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications so that you'll be notified whenever we come up with another video. Until then, stay safe.